Hi, I'm David Kirshner for West Hempstead Echo, and thanks for joining us for our annual school budget interview. And we're here at the Chestnut Street School, just 1 week away from the annual budget vote, which will take place next Tuesday, May 20th. And joining me today, we have Karen Brohm, School Board President, and Brian Phillips, Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations. So joining me today, we have Karen Brohm, School Board President, and Brian Phillips, Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations. I want to welcome you both to what is like our annual get-together and talk about all things about the West Hempstead school budget and the upcoming elections. So Karen, before we dive in, I know the school district always has so many amazing accomplishments. Are there just like a couple of them that we can start off and just really, enjoy that success?
I feel like we do this every year, and I'm like, how long do you have? Because there are so many amazing accomplishments. We have our sixth News 12 Scholar athlete in as many as 7 years, so that's a great accomplishment. In the 1 year we had the twins together. We have seniors who have only 25% of our seniors are already reporting. They've received over $2 million in scholarships. Obviously, they're not taking all of those scholarships. They can only go to one school, but the boys cross-country team was undefeated in their division for the fall. And they had a record of 13-1 in their conference, which they also won the New York State Class C title. We've had some students at the secondary level who competed in a few of the art exhibits around Long Island. We had one student, Victoria Hassan, who actually received a scholarship due to her work in one of those exhibits. We have our students from the secondary school are participating in the Washington DC Memorial Day Parade, which is an amazing accomplishment for us this year. It's the first time that's occurred. We are a nationally recognized primary project school, and we continue to do so many other wonderful things and have so many wonderful programs like the Nassau County Dual Enrollment, Concurrent Enrollment. We have the New York NYU Langone Envision Scholar Program that our kids take part in.
And you also had the tenure for 10 of the faculty, including the principal of the secondary school, correct?
We did on Tuesday. We gave tenure to 10 fabulous educators within our district.
So always amazing things going on at the school district. But let's kind of dive in a little bit to talk about the budget. Of course, the elections are coming up May 20th. And this year, the proposed tax levy cap is 2.3%. What I find interesting, just anecdotally, is I'm hearing a lot less noise about the school budget this year than I have in past years. And I'm just wondering if you have any perspective on that, and if you're hearing a lot of feedback, whether it's positive or negative, and what are your thoughts about the budget going through?
Well, not unlike you, it's been relatively, I hate to say quiet, but I also think that people have become more educated over the past few years. I think that all the noise and all the commentary and all the information that's been going out, people are learning to get their information from where it should come from, the school district. And I think they're seeing that there are increases that we just don't have any control over. There are mandates put in place. I mean, there are mandates being put in place this year alone that we now will have to cover. The, zero admissions busing coming up in the future. That's a mandate that all school districts are going to have to cover somewhere down the line that they're not giving us money for.
And we know transportation is already a hot button. We'll dive into that. The Newsday this week had the New York State breakdown of the budgets, and it looked like there was an additional $290,000 that's going to West Hempstead School District over last year. Was that a budgeted amount? Did you anticipate that? And then if it's an overage, where does that go to?
So do you want to talk about that?
Going by the governor's executive budget from January, that was more or less on point to what we were getting on the estimated level back in January. So we built the budget in West Hempstead this year based upon that, because we couldn't really wait for the New York State legislature to come up with its budget's number. But when it did come out, it was relatively almost on to the exact dollar amount. So during the budget process, we did think we were getting about that much money. but it does not cover all the additional costs that it needed in the district for the year.
But that number was baked in more or less into the budget.
We did. And we did speak in our budget sessions where we were hoping that we would get additional monies. And if you look around Long Island alone, a lot of districts did get additional monies when the state budget actually came out. You have districts that got, $175,000 to $250,000 additional. I think when the actual budget came out, over what we thought we were getting was approximately $5,000. So there's no consistency in where the money's going. Everybody read in Newsday the other day, and not to begrudge them, but Hempstead got $24 million, so it saved a building for them. But in the meantime, they also then got services money, an additional $175,000 in services money, and we got $5,000.
So in Albany, who petition, is the petition done by school district specifically, or it's just done in total and Albany makes a decision? And how do they break it down by school district with all those different percentages?
Well, we do speak to our local legislators for the state level. We reached out to all of them throughout the budget process, explaining the needs of our district, what specifically goes on in our district versus other districts. Can they help tailor possibly aid towards our district? There was a Rockefeller study done last year that was thinking about changing some of the foundation aid formula ideas that go into state aid. Only a few of those ideas eventually made it into the budget this year. Some of those other ideas that we saw last fall into the winter, we were hoping to be put into the budget process, and we hope maybe in the future those would be put in to assist the district more.
Because when you go down the list, and not to stay on this point too much, it is really interesting that you get some schools get a lot, some schools are right on budget, and some schools are negative, and it's what's the thought process in figuring that all out?
Right. So a lot of the problem, and we've discussed this here in the past, is the wealth ratio in the district. And the state doesn't look at the wealth ratio of the students that are inside the public school. They look at the wealth ratio of the community. So they're basing it on a population that doesn't even attend the public schools, whereas maybe that number should be based solely on the people that are attending the public school or the wealth ratio of those families, because that's where the problem lies.
Right.
So that's something that people have solicited is not the right word, advocated for in the past to try and get the wealth ratio changed. If you look at the wealth ratio from here to Franklin Square, we're a wealthier district than Franklin Square.
Yeah, and it seems like probably based on people who are attending the public schools, probably more in line with Hempstead than it is with Franklin Square, to your point. And Hempstead's getting, line share or getting a lot more than West Hempstead. So yeah, I think in the future it would be great to figure out how that all gets equalized, and if there are ways for the state to do it a little bit better.
Right, and I think that the Rockefeller project was looking at that. The Rockefeller study was looking at that a little bit, and they were trying to change the foundation aid formula, but I just don't think any of that went into this year's budget.
So while we're on talking about the state has a new mandate coming in for the next school year for cell phones and all sorts of mobile things like tablets and smartwatches. Can you give us some perspective on how the school's going to deal with that in the coming school year?
Well, I think it's a new mandate that's being put in place. So a lot of the school districts, and ours is not separate of that, we do have some classroom ban in place where the students put their phones away for class time. But she's looking at, from what I understand, a bell-to-bell ban. We really need to look at all of her instructions and see how that's going to work and how it can be rolled out in the district, because she's also saying that the students still have a way to contact their parents. So I'm not really sure that I understand exactly how it's going to work, and that would really be up to the administration. So I don't want to step on anybody's toes and say something that wouldn't be correct.
So at best, it's a work in progress.
Correct.
All right. Let's talk about the reserve fund. So this year, there's a planned $4.9 million withdrawal to help plug a hole in the budget. Where does that leave us with reserves after that 4.9 comes out?
So we're using about 1.9 reserves and about 3 for appropriated fund balance purposes. And if we use the full 1.9 reserves, we would be about $6 million of reserves.
1.9 or 4.9?
For reserve purposes, 1.9, but for fund balance, we're adding additional 3 million. So that's where you get the
So
4.9.
they're two different
So,
pieces.
okay, so just to
No
make sure
problem.
that I'm clear, and I guess those who are watching, from the actual reserve fund,
It's 1.9 million of
1.9.
reserves, but we're using $3 million of fund balance savings from prior amounts to cover the like you said, to plug the budget
Okay.
for 25, 26.
So how much is left?
We'll have about, if we use the full amount of reserves, we'll have about $6 million of reserves at the end of 25, 26.
So at the current burn rate, you got like a year and a half.
That's if we use correct. Like we are using less reserves than last year. You have to have the reserves to use it. So we're just using the amounts that are appropriate to cover the budget for this year.
So what are the plans, or what would be the forward-looking plans beyond the second year to start replenishing the reserve fund, or has there been discussions about that?
I mean, there is an ability to, with savings in the year, but since we do budget rather tight, we don't have extra monies baked into the budget, so that year end, to have the ability to put money away, you usually try to put aside 4% for unappropriated fund balance for emergency items that pop up the following year, things that you just don't expect. And it's above that 4% level, usually try to put towards reserves, but we're getting to that 4% level first.
So that 3 million that you spoke
Right.
about, does that get replaced at all, or that's also like that comes out and nothing else coming in?
If we're not using it, it will be there. So, but if we reach a level where that 3 million is being used, it'll be decreased to the point that it needs to be held.
So I guess I go back to the question in year 2 from now, when theoretically it could either be at zero or very minimal. What would we be do? What would the school do at that point to make up for the deficit?
I think we're just trying to make sure we spend properly in the district, so we don't have to go into our reserves as much, which is why this year we're going into reserves less. It just happens to be this year, but it's based on budgeting, and again, we're trying to be very fiscally prudent and not overspending.
Which kind of leads us into the next subject, because that's an ever-growing expense, which is transportation. So on the one hand, we're talking about potential challenge in 2 years from now, with the hope that costs can be reduced. But what we've been seeing with transportation is that just keeps going. Last year it was 17%, this year it's 12%. And I don't imagine that will ever, become a negative number. And as you pointed out, there's the zero emissions thing, and I can only imagine what kind of strain that's going to put on it. So, how do we, what do we think that's going to play out?
I think it's very difficult to discuss once we're reaching that zero emission bus years. I know they tried to extend out the plan with the most current budget, but if that is going to be put upon the districts, and we do contract out the buses, at some point the cost will have to be borne by the district.
Are the numbers of students or parents who are seeking outside busing, has that been increasing or decreasing? Like year over year?
I think it will fluctuate every year.
Correct.
Because you have children aging out of school, and then you have children coming into school. So it really depends on the demographic that
Okay.
year, and it also depends on where they choose to send their children, because if it's within a certain mileage range, we have to send them.
Right.
We have to provide busing, but if it's outside that range, then we don't have to provide any busing.
Yeah.
And now with Hank K-8 opening, I mean, that's just going to change the busing alone in West Hempstead, because students who maybe got the bus to 609 might not get the bus over here, and vice versa.
Yeah, and it's like juggling. I think there's over 100 outside schools that you're sending. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Has there been any thought of maybe bringing in consultants or others who have been dealing with the same issue to hear what potential solutions there may be? It just seems like we're going in, the budget's going in one direction, and
Well, I don't think that a consultant is going to change the fact that we have to bus all these students. That's
good.
never going to change. If they're entitled to a bus at this point right now, we have to provide it. We do work with consortium of other districts. We work with BOCES and I know Brian can speak to it more, to get the best routes and the best pricing that we can get, we have to go out for cooperative bidding, which is the biggest problem in busing. And we've discussed this already.
In previous years, there's been like one bid,
Right.
which is always, is that still the case?
Currently, we're
Right,
having.
we will go out again with a consortium of districts in Nassau County, and we will try to share routes as much as possible. But it does go out for a public bid, and if one bus transportation company decides to bid on that route, they will be the winning company because we go with the lowest responsible bid always.
Yeah.
So while we would like to have multiple bids for certain routes, if we need to take that route for students to go to a certain school and there is only one bid, that will be the winning bid.
Right. The problem also happens to be that, we have students, they apply, you have to have your busing criteria in by April 1st, but then we also have students that come into the district and then we have to go ahead and bus those students to maybe a district we don't bus to currently, or we have a special ed child who has to go to another location, and those bus routes could end up being costly. So if those were not already budgeted for, because obviously we don't know they're happening, we don't add in extra money for, we're saying transportation is going to be this much money, but this year we budgeted a certain amount of money, and halfway into the school year we had already spent, what was it?
We had to transfer money just to cover up certain routes, and that it is like Karen said, like you will do your information collection by April 1st, and if someone shows up in August and moves into West Hempstead and they want to go to a certain school, they're allowed to go there, and we will try to find a route, and if we're not currently going to that location, that single route might be, quite frankly, could be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per month.
Yeah, and I remember at one of the previous meetings that were held here that Superintendent Riemann had spoken about this, I think, particular case with two children, maybe from the same family, who had like the busing costs were just astronomical. I don't remember all the details, but it just struck me like it was, there's some real baked-in challenges to manage this process.
Yeah, I think we had that conversation the first time that I did this interview with you guys. We had one student, it was $60,000 to bus one child. And that's, people, I don't think that the residents or the community understands that could actually be the case. And in some cases, people think just because there's a bus going somewhere, then it's free to just put a kid on the bus as long as it's room. But it's not the case, because sometimes you're paying per pupil, and that cost could be large.
I remember, I think I volunteered to drive an Uber for that amount of money. So UPK, Universal Pre-K, last year, a lot of noise, the numbers are wrong, private schools aren't getting what they're supposed to. And then you go through the meetings and you kind of hear that, in fact, there is a lot of cooperation that's taking place, specifically between Hank and Hartora and Scope. And it seems for the most part that UPK is just a success. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Well, you know that I am a big proponent of UPK. I would have fallen on the hill for that one. I was getting pre-K in this district no matter what it was going to take. But, it's a learning curve. We're in year 3. It's took us this long to get to a point where we are. We have great collaboration with both Rabbi Hassan, Mr. Rossman, the administrators, and the rabbi from Hartora. And I think the programs are going well in both places, and we've gradually found like that level ground to try to get it to work out the way it needs to. We've come up with different solutions to figure out how to make sure the allocation goes well throughout the year. And it's really important that the children have it.
Yeah.
They're the youngest learners in the district, and if you step into this building any day and just come in and look at what these children are doing, and I'm sure the same goes, I have not been at the programs at Hank or Hartora, but it's so important for these children who otherwise might not get socialization and early learning to have that piece.
Yeah. And anything new coming up on the UPK front for the next school year? Or is it just kind of now we're just going to be implementing this?
Well, now we're in a program. What would be nice is if the governor's budget had given us more per seat money, because as we all know, when they say we're giving you a fully funded pre-K, it just really means they're giving you the amount of seats that you can fill, or they give you more seats, but they don't give you enough money to cover the cost of what UPK really costs.
Right.
So we were hoping that in this year's governor's budget, she was going to up the per pupil amount, but she did not.
Gotcha. So, in the unlikely event that the budget gets defeated, do you have a strategy already in mind? Because I remember the last time you held the board held its ground, kept its budget, and it went through the second time. Any thoughts that would be the same way that could play out for this year?
I wouldn't even venture to answer that question simply because I'm one of 7 people. So the decision would have to be made by the majority of the board. I can say that I fully support this budget as being fiscally sound, and the administration worked really hard to cut everything they possibly could and keep it as level and as fiscally prudent as possible so that we could keep the programs in place for our students and our community.
Great. From a budget run rate perspective, the school district historically has run at about 95, 96% to budget, which I think is a really good number, which just shows that you're being very fiscally sound and you're certainly not going over budget. Any thoughts about how that could be playing out for this year?
I think we're probably along the lines of the same percentage of spending when we get to the by year end. We don't, like you said, we don't have a lot of fluff in our budget to let it get to 90% with 10% left over at year end. We do spend money based on our budgeting. We do, as we said, sometimes some costs like transportation went up during the year. We would cover it within the budget. So we do think 95, 96 probably would be about the right range.
Great. So in wrapping things up, when you put the budget together, sometimes after you're finished, there's things just happen. Are there any unexpected expenses or anything that's happened, even within the last few weeks that you think may even change the budget that was submitted?
I don't think so. I think we were waiting for the final New York State budget with the hopes that state aid would be increased, but we based our state aid numbers on the governor's budget in January, and like Karen said, we got $5,000 roughly above what we thought we were getting in January, but since we based it off of that number, we were pretty sound for our budgeting purposes. We were not crossing our fingers with the expectation we're going to get large amounts of money, and if that did not come to fruition, we would be in trouble. So I think, like many of the districts in New York State, we were all waiting for that budget, but we got to our adoption point of the calendar and moved forward.
Great. And just finally, there's a lot of building going on in West Hempstead, and you got the Westminster Heritage. It's literally like a city going up, 400 units. We were over there for the topping off ceremony, and it's really impressive. And I can only imagine that hopefully down the road, there could be new families, coming into the community. Enrollment on the decrease has been an issue that's been plaguing the school district over the years. So, as you look forward and you look ahead, what are some of the things that we have to look forward to with enrollment? So
enrollment this year has increased, and we did do a study a few years ago that showed that we would be pretty level and or on the incline, which is a good thing.
Great.
However, with the Heritage Project, it's a beautiful building. I would like to move there myself, not have to have.
It really is impressive.
Not have to have, the storage issues that I have. I'll just get rid of everything. But, similar to West 130, there's really no indication that that's really going to bring us students. So there's nothing saying that we're going to get this influx of students that may take up or create an issue for the amount of room we have. We would love to see, some families move in there, some students move in there, but I'm under the impression it's more like a transit hub, and maybe we're going to get, the residents from the hospital or the families that no longer want to have the homes. But it's really something we'd have to wait and see, and it's probably at least a year away. So
they're going to be moving in September, and again with 400 units, even if you can get 20%, 30%, that could be a game changer, and we look forward to it. So Karen and Brian, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's really great to have that you spend the time and that you're willing to talk to us and go deep into the budget. I know it has a lot of nuances, but at the end of the day, everyone in West Hempstead is Ram Pride, and we want to see what's best for the community, and we just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching, and most importantly, you have to go out and vote. This has been a special school board budget interview brought to you by West Hempstead Echo.